Hey, what's happening, everyone? Pragmatic Addict here. So, I remember hearing that the director of American Pie, Chris Weitz, and American Pie cast member John Cho were going to be reuniting for their first horror film together. Now, originally, I was a bit curious about this film's title because originally this was going to be titled They Listen. And with that, I was like, well, who's they? What's this film's premise? What does it mean? Then the film got a title change with a standout AI in it, and it had the marketing from the producer of Megan, and I was like, oh no. So this premise reads, Curtis and his family are chosen to test a new smart home AI called Aya. The digital assistant learns the family's behaviors and routines. However, she develops self-awareness, which leads to her becoming too involved in interfering with their lives. And I tapped out for a second in the first scene of this movie. You know how movies sometimes open up with like a quote from something or someone? Well, this is that case, but it is in fact from something. Oh yeah, this movie, I shit you not, it opens up with a quote from AI. But I am just gonna say, like, just as an opening, obviously past this point, in just a horror movie period, the way this intro is lit, shot, paced, I mean, it did fine in just that standard horror movie fashion. But the actual second that this AI antagonist, Aya, is introduced, you feel that this film's opener, maybe even first act, as far as like the characters, well, more so just John Cho, being, for example, the dad of this teenage daughter. I mean, obviously he has, you know, a couple other kids, but they aren't good in the movie. I'm here focusing on him and his chemistry with his teenage daughter. I do have to give credit to that. At first, it's great to see him back in the film, you know, especially with having a teenage daughter. Being, in fact, another father figure to a teenage daughter, immediately, it actually made me think of the film Searching, where the chemistry, it was well written, the dialogue was funny, it's realistic enough, and also is relevant with the kind of source material that this film is. But other than that, the second that this AI is introduced in this movie and it gets in this household, you feel that everything before this point, before the movie actually becomes what it is and is actually that movie that it was being marketed as, I will say that things up to that point were better than they could have been, were better than I expected them to be. But everything from that point on, it's just, you just feel that it's all downhill from here. This isn't like the case with Megan, where this thing's at least fun, and it's uncanny, and it's actually pretty scary. No, it's just bland, it's got a nothing-ass voice, and it makes its opener by swearing and calling Alexa a bitch when being compared to that. Immediately from that, you're like, this isn't scary, this isn't unique, it's not funny, it's fucking stupid. And now that this thing is front and center in this film, well, again, it's all downhill from here. If you hate AI and you thought that you'd hate this movie because of what this movie seemed to be, which is a PG-13 horror movie from Blumhouse about AI, yeah, it delivers exactly upon that the second that became the movie. Which I will say, I'll say this. Being a horror movie where an AI device is the threat of the film, you expect, and I think just fairly enough, this film has a lot of room, or at least some room, to get stupid and be just that dumb, silly horror film, if done right, based upon that source material. For example, once this thing does get into the house, it hints at that pretty early on where, for example, like, it displays some options for different voices that you could have for it based off of your preference and stuff. And at that instant, I was like, okay, this film seems like it has a sense of what it could be. It seems like it knows what it is. But just pace-wise though, there was a part of me at first when this started happening where I was like, okay, I'm not gonna completely bash it yet. Because after all, the threat is officially in the house now. The film has started, and even more so, there was a tease in the trailer that there may in fact be something else behind this device. You know, whether that be like an entity or something, where it just didn't matter too much to me how it, you know, all started to go down. But it's the execution of the horror scenes when, again, this does become the horror movie that it is, where I felt like being a horror movie focusing both on AI as well as having that potential side storyline where there is something behind it. You think it could get away with whatever it wants to some degree. Again, whether that be just some stupid self-aware nonsense or actually trying to make use of the horror variety that it could have to work with. But goddamn, somehow they still managed to execute these scenes as lame as they can be and still managed to transition into the lamest horror tropes while still having actually a bit to work with as horror movie content. And even more so, you do see kind of immediately once this thing does become the movie that even the makers of this movie had that thought that everyone feared this movie would be about, which is, you know, we can get away with anything because the villain is AI. It's unstoppable. It's invincible. It's the future. And I just wish they would have at least, tried to do something genuinely fun or at least wacky with that instead of just thinking, well, we can kind of get away with whatever. And if not, the movie is still, at the end of the day, a PG-13 Blumhouse horror movie about AI. This isn't going to be critically acclaimed. Let's just do the bare minimum. Focus on a very relevant and controversial thing right now, blend it with the most profitable movie genre out there, and we're set to go. And just with how fast things do go downhill, pace-wise and transition-wise, and how they're dealt with, it just doesn't really feel like this device had any real reason to be the way it is, and that, amongst many issues in the film, make you just not even give a fuck why it's doing what it's doing, or really what's actually going on behind it. Most things in this movie are exactly what you expected or feared coming from this kind of movie. Clearly being a cash grab on one of the most controversial things of today, being presented from that horror movie genre with a PG-13 rating. And overall, I'm gonna give AfrAId a strong negative to a low mixed review, feeling more so on the strong negative side. And also lastly, just as characters, being trapped with this dumbass device in this dumbass horror movie, I'll say, they aren't necessarily bad actors, and not even everything that they're working with in the movie is necessarily bad. Some things, I will say, do make for pretty interesting storylines, actually, and do kind of make sense, or at least, are pretty scary as far as what could realistically happen, or at least be a fear as far as what this movie focuses on. And sadly, even the effects in this movie, being those AI-focused horror scenes, which, come to think of it, I really hope wasn't actual AI incorporated into the movie. It's just the pacing and execution with that where it sadly just falls underneath that dumb fun or fun bad horror that it could have been. But yes, guys, that is going to do it for my review of AfrAId. Let me know if you guys are going to see this movie. I actually don't think there's anything else out this week, which is why I went and saw an 80-minute horror movie based on AI. But regardless, if you guys do see this movie, let me know what you guys thought about it in the comments below. But with all that being said, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one very soon. Take care, guys.